Okay, so we're going to be solving one-step equations. But before we do, I want to get a little bit of vocabulary in. Okay, so three vocabulary items I want to, starting with inverse operations. Inverse operations. So inverse operations are math operations. Write this down, please. Math operations that they're opposites, so they undo each other. And I'm sure you're familiar with which ones they are. So write that down. Inverse operations, math operations that undo each other. They come in pairs. And we actually, in this past unit, we learned of a new one. Um, so we'll include that one. So let's write down examples of what they are. So maybe you learned about these way back in like second grade, third grade. Remember math families? So let me give you an example. You make a math family with two operations, addition and subtraction. Also multiplication and division, right? And then we recently learned of a brand new one, squaring and square rooting. That's those are inverse operations. So the math is full of inverse operations. The main ones we're going to focus on. Eventually, we'll get worked with squaring and square rooting also, but the main ones we're going to cover are these two: adding, subtracting, and multiplying and dividing. Okay, so those are inverse operations. All right, moving on. The next thing I want to talk about is equation. What's an equation? An equation. Well, an equation is actually a math sentence. And what makes something a math sentence? It has some operator on there telling us how to compare the numbers. A math sentence in this case with an equal sign. Maybe later on, if we have time, we'll review inequalities where you have a greater than or a less than sign. But all of our equations have the equal sign. So equation. Okay, I should highlight this as well. All right. So let's get some examples of this. So it could be as basic as 4 plus 3 equals 7. That's an equation. But we're going to do stuff kind of like this. Eventually, they will look like this with variables and stuff. So let's see. 4 take away 2 times the quantity x plus 6 equals uh, negative 5 parentheses 2x minus 5 plus 2. This is also an equation. It's got a lot more stuff, right? And we're going to learn by the end how to perform the correct steps on this equation so that we figure out what is the answer for x. And the answer for x is what we call the solution. So let's talk about solution. Last vocabulary word. Okay, solution. So the way we're going to think of solution is values that replace a variable that make the equation true. Values, so numbers basically, that replace a variable that make an equation true. So let's say I have x take away 9 equals, let's say 10. So I want to think of a number that when I take away 9 from it, gives me an answer of 10. 19. Okay, so this is what we would call the solution. Because if I replace 19 for x, I would have 19 take away 9, which is 10. All right. So far, so good, right? Not too bad. This should all be review, I'm hoping. So let's start solving. I don't think we need to add any more to that. We're going to solve. So whenever we write down solve or are asked to solve, they're asking us to figure out what the variable is. What's the answer to the equation? So let's just practice a little bit. This is going to be hopefully review for all of us. Where I'm going to throw in, I know that maybe last year, definitely the year before, they had you work with equations, even basic ones that were just all positive numbers. We're going to kind of go in the deep end. We're just going to start with negatives right already, okay? So let's do x take away 8 equals negative 7. Maybe you can solve these in your head. I appreciate that. That's great. But I want you to start getting the fundamentals now. We're going to go through the steps that we normally do in algebra to solve these because eventually they're going to look like this. And if you didn't start with the basics at the beginning, getting to solving this is going to be really hard. Okay? So let's go. Well, we want to solve this. We want to find a value for x. X minus something is negative 7. One way to do this is by doing inverse operations. We call them transformations. So I'm going to just draw a line there at the equal sign. Because remember the rule, whatever you do to one side of the equation, you do to the other side. Okay, that's called a transformation. You do the same thing on both sides. And we got a choice. We want to get rid of this minus 8. Any thoughts as to how we get rid of minus 8? Yeah, we have to do the opposite, add 8. So we want to add 8 to both sides. So let's do that. I'm going to think of it as a positive 8. So positive 8 here and positive 8 here. And we'll do the little math operation there. And then let's just kind of go through each step. Look at the x. Nothing under the x, correct? So you just bring it down. we do have something with minus or -8. And you could think of it either way, as a -8 or a +8. A -8 or -8, I should say. -8 or take away 8. I'm going to think of it as -8. What's -8 and +8 together? 0. They cancel out. They make a 0. So sometimes things make a 0, sometimes they make a 1. You'll see in a little bit. Okay, nothing under the equal sign, so just bring it down. And now we have to figure out what -7 and +8 is. Yes, it's 1. So we got our first answer. X is 1. 1 take away 8 is -7. Okay? All right. Let's do a few more. Number 2. Let's do -4 plus, say, n equals +3. Go ahead and write that down. Now, we always want to get rid of the number on the same side as the variable. So that's -4. How do I get rid of this -4? What's the opposite of -4? +4. So if it's adding and subtracting, you always want to create an opposite number. So +4 here, and on the other side of the equal sign, we do the same thing. Sometimes I see +4 here and went right next to it another. It has to be on both sides of the equal sign. Okay, there we go. Let's do this a little quicker. -4 and +4 cancel because they're 0. Bring down the n, bring down the equal sign, and now let's figure out 3 and 4. So the answer is 7. -4 plus 7 is +3. Like I said, I'm sure a lot of this you can do in your head, but you should also be able to do it this way. Okay, number 3. Okay, this will be the last one with adding and subtracting. -6 equals -8 plus k. Technically, this is kind of like a subtraction equation, but it's kind of hidden. Okay, we want to do the same thing on both sides of the equal sign. What do you think we should do? +8. We want to get rid of this -8 again. So +8. All right. And now we have -6 and 8 together. How much is that? That'll be 2. Bring down the equal sign. The opposites here cancel. And then that equals the only thing left on the other side of the equal sign, which is k. Okay. So at this point, I'm not going to draw this little bar in purple. I think we understand, do the same thing on both sides. So let's move on. Let's do some multiplication equations. So in higher math, we don't use this symbol for multiplication for obvious reasons. We don't want to confuse it with x, right? So it's either a dot, or in the case of multiplying with variable equations, you just put the number next to the variable. So this is number 4. That's an ugly 4. So 6m, when I write 6m, what am I doing with the 6 and the m mathematically? Multiplying. Okay. In fact, you guys probably remember from last year, this number being multiplied with a variable, it's always next to it, has a special name, starts with a C. It's coefficient, I heard someone say. Yes. So I'm hoping that sounds familiar to you guys. So we always have a coefficient, and that either means multiplying or dividing. And when it's right next to it like this, it's multiplying. Okay. Let's make it equal to -24. Okay. So I have 6 times something is -24. Again, you could probably already guess the answer, but we want to show the steps. So what's the inverse operation to multiplying? Dividing. So in algebra, in higher level math, we don't use that division symbol here. We don't use that. We just make a division bar or fraction bar. And we divide by the coefficient, and the coefficient is positive 6. So guess what we divide by? Positive 6. Whatever number is being multiplied with a variable, positive, then divide by a positive, negative, then divide by a negative. That's what we divide by. And here's why. This time we're not looking to make a 0 or cancel. We're looking to make 1 of the number 1. What is 6 divided by 6? 1, right? That's what we want. We want a 1. What's 1 times m? What's 1 times anything? Whatever it is, right? And this time 1 times m equals m. And we want to get m by itself. And we get that by creating a 1. So when I cross this out, I think of 1. 1 times m is m. Okay, they cancel out. They make a 1. 1 times m is m. And on the other side, let me bring down my equal sign. It's negative 24 divided by 6. Negative 4. You're just doing regular division. Okay? So the answer is negative 4, because 6 times negative 4 is negative 24. Okay, let's do a couple more. This is number 5. Let's do negative 45 equals 15 times x. So our coefficient is 15. So guess what I have to divide by? 15. Okay, so I'm going to divide on both sides by 15. Okay, so now we want to see how many times does 15 go into 45? 3 times. But what's a negative divided by a positive? So we get a negative 3. And on the other side, we have 15 dividing 15. That makes 1 times x, which is just x. So there you go. Negative 3 equals x. Is it okay that it's kind of flipped over and opposite to that? You see how it's negative 3 equals x and not x equals negative 3? Is that okay? Yeah. Either way, if it bothers you, sometimes it kind of bothers me, especially if we're doing inequalities and not equations, I can just flip it around and say this. And it's the same. If it doesn't bother you, if you can live with it, stick with this first answer. Okay? When we get to inequalities, we'll talk more about, because it will make a difference if we flip it. But that's it. Number 6. Let's do 8 equals negative 4. Oh, I'm sorry, negative 8 equals negative 4k. Negative 8 equals negative 4k. What's our coefficient this time? Negative 4. So we're going to divide on both sides by negative 4. It's always the number that's on the same side as the variable. And since it's multiplying, we do the opposite, divide. So what's negative 8 divided by negative 4? 2. Equals, well, they're identical. We're dividing, so they make a 1. 1k equals k. So our answer is 2, positive 2. All right. So those are multiplication equations, because you're multiplying the number and the variable. The last type we're going to do are division equations, because we divide the variable with a number. So number 7, w divided by 3 equals negative 6. So some number divided by 3 equals negative 6. Write that down. And since it's division, we want its inverse, multiply. So what number are we dividing by? 3. We're dividing by 3. Notice how I said that, dividing by. It's whatever's in the denominator. We want to get rid of that. Okay, it's technically it's a coefficient of 1/3, but we'll talk about that on I see I was about to say tomorrow, Thursday. So we'll talk about that on Thursday. But since the opposite is multiplying, we're going to multiply. And we're going to multiply by the 3. Okay? You may be saying, okay, but how do they cancel? They cancel because technically this 3 can be written as 3 over 1, right? I wanted to show you, we're only going to do this once. Technically, this 3 is in the numerator. This 3 here, you see where I'm pointing, is in the denominator. They cancel. They make a 1. So they go away. And I'm left with just with W equals whatever negative 6 times 3 is. Well, it's negative. Well, we're multiplying. We're not dividing this time, though. We're doing 6 times 3. So it's negative 18. And it works out because if I replace negative 18 here, I get negative 18 divided by 3, which is negative 6. Okay? All right. Let's do 2 more. N divided by negative 8 equals negative 2. So now, n divided by negative 8. What do I want to... Well, first of all, it's division, so we should multiply to undo it. What do I want to multiply by? What's in the denominator? Negative 8. So that's exactly what you multiply by. Because remember, this is in the numerator. That's in the denominator. They're identical. So they make a positive 1. 1 times n is n. They cancel. And I get n equals negative 2 times negative 8. I believe that's positive, right? 16. Okay. So we'll do one more. Last one. Number 9. Okay, so this is going to be negative 12 equals x divided by 2. Negative 12 equals x divided by 2. So it's division. What am I dividing by? 2. So guess what I'm going to multiply by? 2. Positive 2. Now, I'm going to put parentheses around this negative 12 and put parentheses around the 2 I'm going to multiply by, because I don't want to confuse this negative with takeaway. It's 2 times negative 12. Okay? That's why I'm doing that. Well, let's see. 2 times negative 12, negative 24, equals, what's it equal on the other side? This 2 and the 2 in the numerator cancel. X. So the answer is negative 24. Negative 24 divided by 2 is negative 12. There we go. Okay. So on today's Delta Math assignment, you're going to solve addition and subtraction equations, multiplication equations, and division equations. Okay? All right. So either you're finishing up the IXL or you're working on the new assignment, which is a delta. And we have a little bit more time.